All right, so good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jesse, and I am with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. If you're joining us for the first time, and I know we have a whole bunch of you that's the case for today, we are all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world. We do 50-plus broadcasts monthly, live, free, interactive, amazing broadcasts featuring scientists and explorers from around the globe. But our favorite group to partner with, the group that we always get the biggest audience for, is the Toronto Zoo, right here in my hometown of Toronto. We have done over 30 programs with them over the last few years, usually get about 3,000 kids tuning in live and after the fact, so it's always such a pleasure to highlight such amazing animals and people working to conserve species around the globe. I know we've got groups joining us on the Toronto Zoo's YouTube channel, on our YouTube channel, and on Facebook today, so wherever you're joining from, you can use the chat bar to share questions, comments. I really look forward to seeing what you guys are excited about today. Even by the standards of zoo programs, today's is pretty special. We are joined live by Mary Ellen and the zoo team in the Zoo Wildlife Health Center. We're going to learn a little bit about wildlife health and why One Health is all connected, animals, humans, and more around the globe. We are joined by two special guests as well, scientists who are going to talk about some really cool work, and then we're going to dive into a really fun Q&A session together. I hope you're as excited as I am. I can't wait to get underway, and without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to the zoo team at the Wildlife Health Center. Thank you so much for joining us, guys, and take us away.
Hi, my name is Paula, and today we are in our Wildlife Health Center. This brand new center just opened a few years ago in 2017, and it just shows that our commitment to the health and well-being of our animals here, that we've got this big, beautiful building to be able to provide an elevated level of care for our precious animals. Right now, we're in front of the Reproductive Sciences Department, so I'm the research coordinator for Reproductive Sciences. Reproductive sciences, and the point of having that at a zoo, is really the basis of animal conservation. It's a combined match between animal care, and you're going to hear from Annie, one of our veterinarians, very soon, as well as reproductive success with these animals. And health, and the health of the animal and reproductive output are very much linked together. So we work very closely together, and you're actually going to see in a couple minutes exactly how close we are. We're literally neighbors. So right now you're looking at, this is my colleague, and she's doing some hormone analysis. So we receive samples from all around the world. We also monitor our animals here, and we do hormone measurements. So hormones are very important in discussing and monitoring the welfare and health and well-being of animals in our collection and also in the wild. So right now she's actually got a fecal sample. So fecal samples, that's poop, everybody. Oh yeah, super glamorous job, that's poop. Why do we look at that type of sample? It's because it's what we call a non-invasive sample. So when you go to the doctor, every now and then, sometimes you have to give some blood. They'll take a little bit of blood from you, and they want to do a profile on you. They want to look at some of what's going on in your body, health related. We can do that with our animals as well, but we've actually figured out how to do it in a way that doesn't involve touching the animal at all. So the animals poop, we pick it up, we bring it into our lab, and we extract the hormones from those samples. And we can do it from a variety of these non-invasive samples: feces, urine, we can do it from hair, we can do it from feathers. We've picked out a variety of different substances or materials from which we can extract these hormones. So Christine is actually working on caribou poop that was collected from wild populations, and we're going to measure something called cortisol. So cortisol is related to stress of an animal, and there are a variety of reasons why you would have a stress response. You might have it because it's that time of year, it's a breeding time of year, and maybe animals are coming together, so there's a heightened excitement that will cause a release of cortisol. Maybe they're a little bit stressed because some populations are closer to human populations than others, and that might cause a little bit of stress. So we monitor cortisol in these particular samples as a way of monitoring the wild populations and how they're doing out there. We can also look at other hormones related to reproduction. So that would be testosterone, progesterone, estrogen. We can look at pregnancy rates in our population. So in our animals here, we can look for, at post-breeding, we can look for pregnancy, but we can also do that with wild populations. So they'll send fecal samples to us, and we can say the percentage of a population of a particular species, how many are pregnant and how many are not. That's just a little snippet of some of the information that we can glean from doing this type of stuff. If we keep walking down here, you're going to see now we're going into the Wildlife Health Center where the veterinarian technicians work. And this is the start of the animal health level of what we do here at the Toronto Zoo. So in the labs, they'll also collect samples like fecal samples or poop samples or urine. They can look at serum. And in this case, they're looking for things like, in the feces, they're looking for possibly parasites or markers in the fecals that might indicate health and well-being of an animal if there's an issue that happens to arise, or even just as a regular routine health check. So they'll do that here in these labs. We can take serum samples and look at blood and get some, just like we would do when you go to the doctor, as I mentioned earlier, you might have to give a little bit of blood to take a look at things that are going on in your body. The vet technicians will do the same thing here in that lab in here. We're passing by this monitor that has to do with nutrition. Nutrition is critical to an animal well-being as well. So providing them with an amazing quality of life, great food, is important. That's the contribution that our nutrition department provides. They take care of diets for all of our animals, which are individualized for every animal we have has their own individual diet. And our nutrition team takes care of that. They also do quite a bit of research to make sure that they're providing the best mix of nutrients for each individual species. And the requirements are unique for all of them. So as we keep going down along here, we're going to walk into our surgery area. So this is more where we talk about animal medicine, where this is the magic happens with our animal medicine. And I'm going to hand you off to Annie. She's one of our veterinarians here at the Toronto Zoo, and she's going to talk to you a little bit about wildlife health and care.
Hi everyone, thanks so much for that, Paula. My name's Annie. I'm one of the veterinarians here at the Toronto Zoo. Hope you guys are having a great spring break. I know just beginning, weather's not great, but it is warmer than it used to be. And just like you, a lot of the animals are a lot happier now. The weather is warmed up, they're getting out more. But for us, the vet staff, spring also means that animals are getting their annual health checks. So what we usually do is, unless there's an illness or there's an actual issue with an animal, we check them at least once or twice a year. And that usually can occur here in this area, or sometimes actually on site. So the animals don't always have to leave their enclosures, which usually is a little less stressful for them, and it is a little nicer. So just to show about this area, this is the surgery suite. So what happens is if there is an animal that is quite sick and it might need a procedure, this is normally where we take them into this room. It's usually kept very, very clean, and we have to maintain that so that we keep the animals as clean as we can before, during, as well as after surgery, so they have the best chance of improving and getting back to their original selves, and everyone's all happy. So let's move on to the next room. So this is our main treatment room. This is actually a lot of times where a lot of our health checks occur, actually this and the neighboring room. When we do have an animal that is sick, sometimes we'll bring them in here. Sometimes they are awake when they come in here, and we can do some of these health checks awake. So animals like turtles, like some snakes, and some birds that are trained very well by our amazing zookeepers, we're able to actually do their exam when they are awake. So, we'll check just like how you go to the doctor. If we have an animal in, we'll check their teeth, we'll check their beaks, we'll check their body, see how much fat stores they have. We want to make sure they're not too chubby, but they're also not too skinny. We want them to have the healthiest, to be the healthiest that they can be. And as well as Paula had mentioned, this is also sometimes where we actually collect a lot of the samples that sometimes we pass on to the repro department. So samples like blood that we can get from different locations depending on the animal. We'll get, of course, the poop, which is not the nicest thing, but it tells us so very much, and is such a helpful sample to get, as well as urine, and sometimes to other swabs of an animal's mouth. If it looks a little red and a little abnormal, we'll take a sample of that and see how that looks. So as here you can see on the screen, we're actually doing an exam on a fish, and the fish is asleep. You can see its gills moving, but it's actually asleep, and we're just doing a quick exam on it. So that's actually, a lot of that occurs in this room. We want to move on to the next room, which is a little small, but you can see a little bit into. This is where our diagnostic room is. So we actually take a lot of x-rays and do ultrasound. So what that is kind of like Superman, except we can't do it with our eyes. Our x-ray machine can see into the animal. So we can actually see inside what it looks like. So as you can see from this picture right here, this turtle actually has quite a few eggs inside her. So that's actually part of the health checks that we do sometimes. It's just to see how our animals are doing, if we are expecting some babies, so that our zookeepers can prepare for them and make sure that they have the best chance of hatching, and we get them going right away the minute they are good to go. With our ultrasound, what that is basically sending a type of sound through our animals, and that gives us a different picture compared to the x-rays. We're able to see some different aspects, like if you have a belly ache, sometimes you go to doctors, they may put an ultrasound on you, and that just helps to see kind of in real time how things are moving, if your belly, if all the food is moving well, how much, if we're collecting a urine sample, sometimes we might want to see how much urine's in the bladder, how big it is, where it is, so that we're able to get the best sample that we can. Apart from that, a lot of the health checks include things like vaccination. When you go to the doctor and you get your annual shots, we definitely do that for our animals as well. We want to make sure, especially because a lot of our animals are, housed inside and outside. We have wildlife coming through, wild birds, we have raccoons, we have squirrels. So we want to make sure that our animals stay as healthy as they can, and we protect them to the best that we can. And I think that's it for me from today. Jesse, I will swing things back to you for the next speaker. Thanks so much.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. And what a neat whistle-stop tour of some of the cool things you guys are doing in the Zoo Health Lab. I want to stress, too, we have over 500 people tuning in from around the world today. We've got at least 20 classrooms joining in from across North America and beyond. So such a thrill having such a wide audience today. Thank you guys so much for joining. For our two guest speakers, we're going to start with Dr. Christina Guzzo. She is joining us from UTSC, the Scarborough campus of the University of Toronto. I'm really excited to dive in with her, joining us for the very first time on the broadcast. Christina, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. I am someone who works at the university as a scientist. I'm a researcher. And what I do is I study viruses in specific. And so what I thought today I would share with you what we as scientists can learn from animals to help protect humans and human health. So what is a virus? So shown here is a picture of a cell in purple, a big immune cell that is so small you can't see it with your eye. You need to use a microscope. It's one of those building blocks of our human bodies. And in yellow are viruses, teeny tiny little particles. They're about 100 times smaller than a cell. And here you can see they're covering the surface of the cell, trying to find a way to enter, to get inside. And so viruses are really different in the sense that they cannot live on their own. They need to get inside of a cell to make more of themselves, to replicate. And what happens is when viruses enter a cell, they kind of become like this thief shown here. And so what they do is they hijack the cell and they command the cell to use all of its resources, all of its energy to make more copies of the virus. And when they do that, the way that they enter the cell is a very specific way. It's kind of like a key in a lock. So shown here is one virus, so one of these yellow particles. And if we zoom in and look at the surface of the virus, you'll see that it's covered with spikes. And you can think of these spikes kind of like keys on the surface of the cell, of the virus. And so what these keys do is they look for a very specific keyhole on the cell, and they try and open up a door to enter the cell. And so every virus needs a very specific type of host cell, needs a very specific key and lock to enter that cell and make more copies. Now, this is kind of a golden rule that every virus needs a specific key and lock. but sometimes this rule can be broken, and that is when we get worried. So how does a virus survive and spread? Well, shown here is a cartoon of what we just saw on the last slide. There's our little yellow virus and our purple cell, the host cell. And what that virus does is with these spikes on its surface, it will bind to or attach to the surface of that cell. And it will try to open up that lock with the spikes and enter. And once that virus enters, it hijacks and it starts to make more copies of itself and assemble new viruses. And those new viruses then leave the cell and become free viruses to look for other cells in the body to infect. Now, what happens sometimes is we get mutations. When the virus is hijacking that cell, it might make mistakes when it's starting to make new versions of itself. And when new versions of that virus arise, we call them mutants or mutations. And those mutants can be dangerous because when a mutant arises, that's when a virus might be able to infect a different type of cell, host cell. So in this case, we call this a zoonotic jump or a zoonotic virus, a virus that was originally in an animal and now has mutated or found a way to infect a human and cause disease. And that is where we get worried when these new viruses jump between animals and humans. So we can study this, and we have over the history of our humanity. And so what we've seen over time is that these zoonotic jumps, these zoonotic viruses, they happen all the time in many different ways. So here are examples of wildlife, so humans interacting with wildlife, maybe hunting, and we see viruses like HIV and Ebola that have come from wildlife animals and jumped into humans. It happens with domestic animals like farming, as well as wildlife farming. And it even happens with animals in live markets, where viruses from those animals also jump into humans. So we see viruses like influenza, so our yearly flu that makes you sick, can come from a variety of these different zoonotic jumps. Now, you might be surprised to know that there are over 250 different zoonotic viruses that exist, 250 viruses that can go between human or animals and humans. And in fact, what might be more concerning is that there are over 1.7 million undescribed viruses that we think exist in mammals and birds and that pose a threat to jumping into humans. So what can we learn from animals to protect humans? Well, one thing that we can do is we can study viruses in these animals and try to make a prediction, try to think about or have some educated guesses of how these viruses and which ones might jump or spill over into humans. And we can rank them, those that are most dangerous, those that we're worried about the most as the high-risk viruses, the high-risk animal viruses that are most likely to jump into humans, or rank them into those that are low risk, those that we should be less concerned about. And we can do this, we can study or we can make these predictions a variety of different ways. We can use computer modeling, we can look at databases of research and science on animal viruses. And then even most recently, I put an example of a website here. If you'd like to go to this website, you can actually compare the risk of different animal viruses and the risk that those animal viruses might jump into humans. So this is a really cool resource that was recently published and likely fueled by the pandemic that we're currently living in. And so what these people do to create this website is they talk to different scientists like myself, those who study viruses, particularly viruses in animals. So these are experts from countries all over the world. And they ask scientists to tell us what are some of the factors, some of the characteristics that make a virus likely to spread to a human. So there are things in the host, in the animal that we worry about, things like how often the animal might interact with humans, or the geography of that animal. For example, if this animal is up north in the Arctic, it's much less likely that you would have a human come into contact with that animal. Or we can even talk about how related that host, that animal, is to humans. So for example, a monkey virus is much more likely to infect a human because humans and monkeys are very closely related. So the environment that the virus was living in a monkey is quite similar to the environment in a human. We can also look at the virus itself. So there are characteristics about viruses that make them more risky to spread in humans. So the mode of transmission, if a virus spreads just through air, just through breathing, right now we're in a pandemic where a virus spreads through air. It's very easy to spread that virus. We all need to wear masks and we need to distance. That makes that virus much more risky to spill over to humans versus a virus that may only spread through the fecal route, through poop or through blood. We can also look at the environment of where that virus and that host live. And so as we know, with climate change, with development, with deforestation, changing the way we use our land and the way we farm, we're pushing animals into new climates, into new habitats, and also humans are having new interactions with these animals. So what we do is we can take all of these different risk factors and calculate those viruses and animals that are most risky to spread to humans. And so it's like we can have a watch list. Which viruses should we be most worried about in animals? So you might wonder then, what do we do to look for viruses in animals? And it's important to report that it's not easy to do routine wildlife testing. You would have to have somebody going out into the forest, going into your backyard, into your park, and collecting samples from wild animals all the time and testing that in the lab like we just saw at the zoo. And that's simply not feasible. It would cost a lot of money and take a lot of time. But it is very important. And so I think COVID-19 has taught us that we need to think of ways to look for viruses in animals and to be more watchful of that. So here's an example. This is the family of coronaviruses. Each of these, each row is a different virus, a different coronavirus in the family of coronavirus. And what you can see is that each of these viruses has a natural host in the wildlife, shown here. So most of them are rodents or bats. And typically the natural host we're not too worried about. The host, that animal in the wildlife, and that virus have struck a balance, knowing how to live and how to evolve and not succumb to disease. But what happens is these wildlife hosts eventually can spread to an intermediate host, something that we come into contact through farming or through regular human contact. And when the virus jumps into that intermediate host, we then get really worried. We have risks of that virus now mutating in that intermediate host, becoming a different virus, and being able to spread to humans. And so what you see over history is this has happened many times for coronavirus. Most recently, the pandemic we're in, but many other versions of coronaviruses have gone through intermediate animals to spread to humans. And humans are more likely to come into contact with these animals than the natural host. And that's where we get worried. A faster rate of mutation, the virus changes in these intermediate animals. And if any of these animals happen to be endangered, we're at further risk of losing that species on Earth because they will fall sick to the new virus. And so what I want to show you is that although we have this natural host, these bats, for example, for our SARS coronavirus, and then we have the intermediate hosts where that virus changes and becomes a virus that can infect humans, then humans can spread that virus to animals. And for example, minks, an animal that is farmed by humans for their fur, minks can get infected with that new virus and spread that virus back to a human. So the virus can go back and forth between animals and humans. And that's when we start running more risks of mutations, more risks of new viruses evolving. So how do we protect animals? Well, it's really important to protect them to avoid spread and mutation. So we know that, a coronavirus, the virus that we're living with right now, can infect our pets, can infect your household animals, mice, even farmed animals. And so it's really important to treat your pets like any other family member that might get sick. If you fall ill, you don't want to spread your virus to your pet. And if your pet has the sniffles, you don't want that pet to spread the virus to other humans. The other thing we do, as your vet techs have talked about from the Toronto Zoo, is that we need to vaccinate and protect animals. So just like we need to go to the doctor and have our checkups and our vaccinations, our animals need to be protected too. So there's 3 main points that I talked about today. I hope you'll remember. One is that animal viruses can very easily jump into humans. We call this a zoonosis, a zoonotic virus, and that can result in disease. Also, I hope you appreciate and understand that many more new human viruses are going to come from our animal friends. And so that means in our future, we're going to have more outbreaks and maybe even more pandemics in our lifetime. And therefore, it's really important to support research and scientists who are studying animal health and animal viruses to help us better respond to future human diseases. And that's all from me. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Guzzo. And I mean, it's such a really important topic today that the feedback in the YouTube comments has been amazing. People are really keen to learn about these things, how we can help combat them. This is a field of research that's been around for decades. But of course, in the last year and a half, we've also had much more reason to be more interested in it in the years to come. And I think that it's really heartening to see the scientific and medical community en masse around the world really mobilized to try and help prevent future pandemics like COVID-19 from ever happening again. And I think it's a really heartening story that we can all sort of get behind, that the medical establishment has so quickly created vaccines to help combat something in such a short timeline. So it's thank you so much for sharing all that. What a cool story for us today.
My pleasure.
Dr. Guzzo. All right, we are going to go 4,000 kilometers to the west to Vancouver for our other guest speaker who has an enviable backdrop and setup for his video broadcast. I think we're all getting very professional at video broadcasts at this point. But Rodrigo Solis is joining us. He's going to tell us a little bit of another cool story, tying it all together, highlighting the One Health aspect of today's presentation, and then we will dive in with questions with all you folks live and on YouTube. So Rodrigo, thank you so much, man. Take us away.
Hey, Jesse, how are you? And hello, everyone. So, yeah, I'm here all the way down to Vancouver, luckily getting some nice weather. And I just wanted to follow up with our previous presentation. I think it was wonderful. I hope you felt the same way. But I want to talk about how animals' health affects us humans, but not as physically, but actually how animal health enriches human spirit. So it is not only taking care of pets, because then we will get sick as well. It is because if we take care of animals, our psyche, our way we think, our spiritual health will be in good way as well. So, and I mean, you just have to take a quick look anywhere in the world, to any culture, and you'll see that animals are always related to us, to humans, in a spiritual level. For example, oh, by the way, I didn't even tell you, if you have any questions, whatever you need, of course, we will have our Q&A session, but also here's my email is down there, and my Twitter, so you can send me a tweet and I'll be more than happy to talk to you. I work mainly with butterflies, with butterfly conservation, but I'm also a vet. So whatever comments, suggestions, or questions you might have, more than happy to talk to you. But anyway, going back. So if you see to any culture, like we have that relationship with animals, like that spiritual feeling from animals. So for example, let's go way back to the past, Egyptians, right? You just look, most of the remnants of Egyptian old culture, and you'll see, for example, here a cat, right? Cats were worshipped, and they were a really central part of religion with Egyptians. But let's not go all the way there to the other side of the world. Just here in Canada, right? We have First Nations, right? If you just see their culture, it's circled around their relationship with animals. Just their totem poles. The pole that you see here has a frog, whale, seal, bear, and they would give them personalities. They would give them like magical properties, and they would represent something. So whatever was happening on the animal kingdom would reflect on the spirit of the society. So, but okay, that is like religious, like magic, let's say. But it's not only that. Let's talk about, for example, the First Nations across the prairies, right? Back in the day, they would basically leave out the huge herds of bison just roaming widely. And even though they would rely on them and they would have to hunt them and kill them in the end, they would respect them. And they would have this relationship with the bison. And just put yourselves in their shoes when the settlers came and they basically wiped out the bison across the prairies. What would you feel as a First Nation person just being there and seeing that counterpart of you that was helping you to survive is no longer there? At the spiritual level, it hurts, right? So those are some old examples how it was in the past, but let's not stay there, right? In the present, even in the present, like that, we are all surrounded by technology and cities and so separated from nature. We still have some of that. For example, just in Ontario, the official animal in Ontario, the common loon, right? It is still there, that connection with animals. Here where I am at British Columbia, we have the spirit there, which also is the official animal and represents a lot of what BC is. But as I told you, what I really work with right now is butterflies, especially the monarch butterfly. And I'm pretty sure if you're around Eastern Canada, you've seen this beautiful butterfly flying around in your backyards, especially during summer. And if I ask anyone in Ontario, they will say like, oh yeah, I remember back in my childhood that I would just see monarchs all around. So that brings you back to your childhood. So it is still like feeding your spirit. On top of that, in case you don't know, the monarch migrates all the way down from Mexico, the US, and Canada. So even like a political level, it represents the community between three countries, how they get together, right? So it's a really important icon. And speaking of the migration, just in case you haven't heard of it, let's talk a little bit about that. So this is North America, where you see this little monarch here, well, there. That is where the monarchs spend their winter from November to March. They spend their winter there when things are really cold up here. They get intelligent and move down south to Mexico. They spend from November to March. Then when spring comes, they start migrating north. They start migrating north and reproduce and lay their eggs across southern US. And that first generation then keeps moving north, reproduces more, so the population keeps increasing, and gives way to second generation, third generation, and they just keep spreading all across North America. And it is around July, August that actually you start seeing them here in Canada, that they reach all the way here in Canada. But those butterflies that reach Canada are not the ones that were in Mexico. They are their great granddaughters. What it is so amazing, it is that those butterflies that we see here in Canada in late August, instead of keep reproducing, they will migrate back south to exactly the same places where their great grandparents overwintered 1 year before. Nobody knows how actually they find exactly the same forests. I even get lost in my neighborhood, and these guys, they just find the same patches of forest across the whole continent. But not only that, think about just this spectacle of having the whole population of butterflies spread across the US and Canada, getting concentrated down in Mexico in just a few patches of forest. So those patches of forest, just for you to think, in 1 hectare, which is roughly like 2 football fields, in that somewhat small space, you can see 100 million butterflies on top of you. That is 3 times the population of Canada. So that in itself is amazing. It's wow. But what is also, and relates back to culture, and we were talking before, the monarchs arrived down to Mexico exactly on November the 2nd. which for Mexican culture, it is what we call the Day of the Dead. When we celebrate, the Mexican culture celebrate their dead ones. When the traditional belief says that the souls of the dead, they come back to visit us and to comfort us and to be with us during those days. So, as I was telling you, that concentration of monarchs in just these few patches of forest made an amazing sight. So that brownish color that you see in the trees, that brownish colors, those are monarchs. They change the color of the forest because of that huge concentration. So let's jump right down to that forest. So that is what you see down there. It is amazing. It is quite a spectacle that you should go and check it out. But anyway, as I was telling you, this starts with the Day of the Dead. And traditional culture, these pictures that you see down here, are from celebrations of the Day of the Dead in Mexico. And if you see, there is a common pattern on those pictures. The color orange, right? Which is the same as the monarch. That is because the Day of the Dead, actually, the monarch is like a central topic on the Day of the Dead. Because for the Mexican culture, the monarchs that are arriving exactly on the Day of the Dead, they are the souls of their dead ones. Dead ones reincarnated as butterflies to come and comfort us on the Day of the Dead, but stay with us all over the winter, from November to March, when days are colder, darker, and when you actually need comfort from your loved ones. So that it is a really nice feeling, nice tradition of how to interpret this beautiful spectacle. And actually, when you stay really quiet inside this overwintering sites, the sound of the flapping of the wing, the monarchs, the flapping of their wings, makes like this whisper. There are so many that you hear whispers flying around you, and that is thought that actually is like the loved ones that are whispering to you. So again, you just keep seeing in these pictures on my left how that it is turned into culture and how that is related to culture and to spiritual health. Now, what is happening? The monarch has been decreasing over the last 20 years. So this little graph here that you see, basically it is the size of those colonies over time. So 20 years, during the 1995-1996 season, it was 18 hectares, which is roughly like 44 football fields of just monarchs. It was quite a large number. The worst season ever, this one, was just 0.69 hectares, which is like roughly a bit less than 2 football fields. So they just decreased a lot. And just think for a moment, could that mean for a person that actually believes in this tradition? The souls of their dead are not coming anymore. That is actually hurting your spirit, right? So on top of just the value of the species by themselves, it is also what they represent to us that we have to take care of. Especially with the monarch, the main problem, it is the monarch relies on this plant that you see here, milkweed. The monarchs lay their eggs on top of this plant to give birth to, I am covering it, but anyway, to that larvae. And they only can do it on this plant. But this plant is considered a weed by farmers. So when you consume products that are genetically modified, GMOs, indirectly, like you are not contributing to take care of the monarchs. So just try to stay away from GMO products. Try to provide some habitat, some milkweed in your backyard to the monarchs, so you can keep this amazing tradition. And I think that's all that I have now for you guys. So go back to you, Jesse.
Rodrigo, that was beautiful. We almost have never had someone talk about the spiritual aspect and the reverence for wildlife ever in the history of the broadcast, so I really personally appreciate that. The last trip I went on before the pandemic hit was to Mexico to see those butterflies, something I'd wanted to do since I was a very little kid, and so it's so neat to get to showcase that story today. Thank you so much. Guys, this has been so much fun. We've sort of covered the gamut of a whole bunch of topics. We've got another 10-15 minutes for questions. So what we're going to do is focus on our live classes today. I know we have tons coming in on YouTube, but we're short on time. So I want to make sure is that our live groups joining us from Alberta, BC, Florida, Ontario, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and more get the chance to ask those questions. And then what I'll do is share a few resources for all our classes so that you guys can learn more and keep the excitement going when you're done. In fact, I'll share those first just in case classes do have to go. So briefly, the Toronto Zoo, of course, our big partner today, spearheaded this whole broadcast. We're always excited to have them back. If you want to find out more about their amazing education work online, head to the torontozoo.com Zoo to You site. You can also check out all our past broadcasts with them on the Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants YouTube channel. If you guys want to help protect monarch butterflies, protect pollinators in general, this is a big topic for classes around the world. The David Suzuki Foundation has the Butterfly Way Rangers Project, one of the biggest in Canada. An amazing organization. Check that out. It's a really, really cool tool. And then finally, if you want to be half as excited as Rodrigo is about wildlife, and I am, we have a program at Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants called Backyard Bio, where we are going to be connecting classrooms, eco clubs, schools around the world in showcasing all their local wildlife and reveling in what they can discover. So between social media, the iNaturalist app, and those direct connections, head to backyardbio.net. All May long, we're running it. It's the biggest campaign we've ever run. We'd love to have you guys involved wherever you're joining from around the world. With that, let's dive in with questions. If you have questions for Rodrigo, for Dr. Guzzo, for the zoo team, anyone you want to ask questions to, they're all around with me still. Let's start with Libby joining us in Auburn, Alabama, one of our most stalwart, exciting students. Libby, if you want to unmute your mic, come on in and ask away, and we'll direct you to whoever you want to ask it for.
Hi. Hi. As Jesse said, my name is Libby, and I love animals. How can I get involved with conservation and helping animals just live?
Yeah, fantastic.
The animals.
We're going to save the animals together. Let's start with the Toronto Zoo team. I want to see if they have a good answer for that one. If you want to unmute your mic, guys, come on back in. How do we save animals together, guys?
There are lots of excellent ways that you can actually help, that you can contribute to animal welfare, animal conservation. There's a thing called citizen science. So speaking from a science perspective, there's a concept called citizen science where we actually go out into the public and we ask them to help us to collect data. So making observations about your favorite animals, find out if there's a local team that is asking for citizen sciences to go out into the field, into the wild. When you're out on your hike, collecting data. Did you see a particular bird? Where did you see that bird? What did it look like? Things like that. And then you send this data to the groups, and they're collecting it and putting it together to create a big data set to help those species out in the wild. So that's one way that you can help.
I love that answer. I mean, it speaks to what we're doing with Backyard Bio already. I brought up on the screen the iNaturalist and Seek apps. They're the ultimate tools for sharing nature observations. So wherever you are in the world, they're amazing. I'm sorry, did you have another answer for us? I think I might have interrupted you there.
I think Mary Ellen wanted to say something.
Yes, just one quick other way here. If you live local to us here at the Toronto Zoo, there are lots of opportunities for zoo ambassadors and zoo volunteers for you to get involved with programs and different events that we run here to help in conservation. But also just by participating in our program today, by learning and listening to all of our experts today on the call and sharing that information that you've learned today, you are helping to conserve lots of species in the wild and make sure that we have a better and brighter tomorrow for everybody here on planet Earth. So just by being here today, you're already doing a small part as well.
Fantastic. You got a big thumbs up from Libby for that one, Mary Ellen. Let's head to our next group. We've got Mr. LeVogue with a bajillion grade 1 students in North Palm Beach, Florida. Lucky him. Mr. LeVogue, if you want to share a question for us, go for it.
Yeah, certainly. I'm going to combine two similar questions, and this is for the Toronto Zoo. Hassan wants to know, how do you know if an animal is sick? And Abigail wants to know is, how do you find out that that sick animal then has a virus?
Hi, everyone. So how do we know if our animal is sick? One big thing is, like when you have a pet, you as the owner will recognize, you know your cats and you know your dogs the best. So you know when, Fluffy is looking a little off, or maybe Fluffy's poop isn't quite looking as normal. For us, we have our zookeepers, our amazing zookeepers who are so great at their jobs, and they know their animals so well, every individual, their personalities, what they normally like to eat, what they don't like to eat, what their poops normally look like, especially if they are normally kind of abnormal. So the keepers are really great at picking that up. So when they do notice that someone's not looking quite right, if one of our giraffes is a little lame, or one of our zebras is not quite eating the normal food that he really likes to eat, they will bring it to our attention, and that's when we go and first do one visual check. We'll make sure that nothing severe is going on, and then we'll take it from there. Sometimes if the animal's trained for a blood sample, so some of our polar bears, they will actually put their paw out into this little container, and our veterinary technicians are actually able to just get a sample, and our bears will just stay there and hold. And it's amazing training. That's one of the ways that we can try to figure out what else is going on. Now, from there, if we are concerned and there's something that we are worried about, then we would look into potentially doing a sleep exam in a way. So we'll kind of put them into a sleep just so that everyone's safe and we can do the best exam that we can. And then we'll go from there and see with all the equipment, the amazing things that we can do with our technicians, and we can try to figure out what's going on. In terms of viruses, a lot of times it does depend on what kind of virus you're looking at. It depends on where they're sick with. If a snake is sneezing, which a snake should never be doing, then a sample you might be collecting is if they're sneezing and some goober comes out of their nostril, that's what you're collecting. In terms of cats, sometimes, our snow leopards, let's say, who actually are just finishing up one of their pre-shipment exams right now. So they are actually having some testing done via blood. Now, a lot of that with viruses, with those specific viruses, your domestic cats, so your kitties at home can actually get the same virus. So that's another type of sample that we can collect to test for viruses.
Very, very cool. Thank you so much for that. I love that snake sneezing is your go-to weird example. That was fantastic. I want to bring up one quick citizen science project that I forgot to mention. Rodrigo mentioned it in his talk. If you guys are keen on butterflies, eButterfly is an amazing resource. Check that out. Find it on Google. Find it online really, really readily. A fantastic program for anyone who's keen to learn more about butterflies in particular. All right, we've got time for 3 more questions. Thank you guys so much for sticking around a little bit later than usual for us. Miss Holden in Spruce Grove, Alberta, again, one of our longest standing teachers. Come on in, take us away.
Hi, Jesse. Danielle is wondering if animals cry when they're hurt, and how do you tell if an animal is hurt?
Cry when they're hurt, and how do you tell?
That is a very good question. Depending on the animal, sometimes they can vocalize, some animals, like maybe some of our cats and some of our hyenas, if they are painful, especially if, let's say one of them is limping and we want to go and just take a feel, especially if they will accept us touching them when they're awake, we might touch one area. If it feels a little swollen, it's a little painful, they might give a little yip, or they might just hold their foot back. And that's when we know that area, whatever we have touched, is uncomfortable. So that's definitely one way that we can figure out. And so some animals do. Other animals, like if you have a turtle, they might not vocalize as much as you would think, as much as maybe a mammal would do. So in that case, then looking for signs of pain is a little bit different. You are still looking for things like a reaction. So, you touch anywhere that's painful, maybe if it's a hand or a paw, a leg, they'll pull it back, and that's another way of figuring out if they're comfortable.
Yeah, I love that answer. And I think, for any of our people at home that have pets, you've certainly had this experience where you've seen a pet that might be in pain, might be a little bit sick. I think we all sort of have an instinctual understanding of what this is like. And it really does apply to a lot of the animals that you'd find at a zoo or aquarium as well. So very cool question, guys. All right, one more question. Ms. V's class joining us in Cleveland, Ohio. Welcome in, guys, and wrap us up.
Go ahead. What is the biggest animal in the zoo?
The biggest animal in the zoo.
So there's definitely a couple. If you're thinking biggest as in size, I'd probably have to say it's one of our male white rhinos. We have one here named Tom. He is just under 5 1,000 pounds. That's about 5 pianos. So he's a pretty big boy. But we also have some of the tallest animals here at the zoo as well. And that would be our Maasai giraffes. Kiko, our male, he stands at just over 16 feet tall. So me as a human, I'm 6 feet tall. So that would be like me and then 2 kids or more standing on top of my shoulders. So he's a pretty tall boy. And we do have our female who is a little bit shorter than him, and our baby Amani, who stands, she was born being my height at 6 feet tall. So she was already really big when she came into the world. So I think those would be our biggest animals we have here.
That was a fantastic answer and some really inspired camera work, so thank you for that. Guys, this has been so much fun. I know we could probably take questions all day for Dr. Guzzo, Dr. Solis, the zoo team. Thank you guys so much for putting together such a special presentation with us today as we dove into zoo health, One Health, viruses and how they're transmitted between animals and people, and a reverence for wildlife and the amazing things that happen in Mexico every year on the Day of the Dead and with regards to monarch migration. This has been such a fun presentation, and it will live on YouTube forever. If you guys are keen to tune in after the fact or share it with friends and colleagues, it will live there, so I hope you get the chance to watch later. And again, just a few quick resources before we wrap up. Check out the Toronto Zoo's amazing programs at Zoo to You or on our YouTube channel at Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. Check out our own epic global nature campaign happening all May long with backyardbio.net. If you want to find more presentations with the Toronto Zoo and with other amazing organizations around the world, check out our website at exploringbytheseat.com. And finally, if you want to learn more and take action, citizen science is the way to go, and eButterfly by Rodrigo is a really cool way of doing just that. Thank you guys so much. And what we do at the end of every broadcast, I'm going to bring in our speakers first, and I'm going to bring in our remaining students that didn't have to run away for the end of the day. So Dr. Guzzo, Toronto Zoo team, Rodrigo, thank you guys so much. And then Libby, Miss Holden, and Miss V, if you could join me in saying a big thank you and goodbye. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Thank you.